what happened to the centurion? Because Paul's a prisoner, right? No? And he's being taken to Rome, right? And now we're spending a week here and 3 days here and all sorts of people. This is more like a celebrity entrance to Rome rather than the prisoner coming in with chains and disgrace. What's going on? Why is the centurion missing? Shouldn't he have an opinion about these things?
Is his job done?
His job is, well, it's not. He's not in Rome yet.
Okay.
His job can't be finished. It's like, yeah, but it seems like he's handed it over.
Seems like Paul's proved himself to be pretty faithful to get there even through the storm and through everything else, so I think maybe the centurion's cutting a little slack and saying, hey, you know, whichever decision, you've made the right decisions against all the other 200 people on the ship, so let's see what you want to do. So
Yeah. I think you're on the trail here. I think there's something happened to the centurion. We're not being told about it because it's not part of our story. But the centurion who gave Paul some slack from the very beginning, who after the shipwreck, or at the shipwreck, is saying, spare them, keep them alive, is intervening, is kind of not mentioned in the island at all, and not mentioned ever after. But we know he did his job because Paul ended up in Rome under house arrest. So we know that happened. He did deliver the goods. We also know that he has seen so much stuff. He saw the whole wreck thing. He saw the declaration that God would look after them. He saw it work out like Paul had said. He saw what happened on Malta. He saw the miracle of the guy's dad getting healed. He saw things happening. He probably heard all about the snake bite, I'm pretty sure. So he knew something was going on here. And my guess is that he probably got the picture. Do you think that Paul never preached to him, perhaps? I think pretty much he was the prime subject. And I think that's probably what happened. So we have this picture then as they're coming towards Rome, and the picture we're building is of this is a picture of the rapture. They came out 30, 40 miles to welcome him, to bring him back into their place. That's what that really means. And that's the context we think about, or should be thinking about. They heard the news, and they were going to make sure that he was welcomed. Now, had they ever met Paul before? No, but they had probably received the book of Romans and had heard that he was coming and had had some pre-introduction to him. They'd heard his reputation. They'd heard some stuff. Let's pick up at verse 17, and let's see what happens as Paul is living in Rome now. 3 days later, he called together the leaders of the Jews. When they had assembled, Paul said to them, "My brothers, although I have done nothing against our people or against the customs of our ancestors, I was arrested in Jerusalem and handed over to the Romans. They examined me and wanted to release me because I was not guilty of any crime deserving death. But when the Jews objected, I was compelled to appeal to Caesar, not that I had any charge to bring against my own people. For this reason I have asked to see you and talk with you. It's because of the hope of Israel that I am bound with this chain." They replied, "We have not received any letters from Judea concerning you, and none of the brothers who have come from there has reported or said anything bad about you. But we want to hear what your views are, for we know that people everywhere are talking against this sect." They arranged to meet with Paul on a certain day and came in even larger numbers to the place where he was staying. From morning till evening he explained and declared to them the kingdom of God and tried to convince them about Jesus from the law of Moses and from the prophets. Some of them were convinced by what he said, but others would not believe. They disagreed among themselves and began to leave after Paul had made his final statement. We'll come to that in a second. So we have this picture now of Paul in prison. It's a kind of mixed up prison deal, isn't it? How come he's in prison when all this stuff is going on and it's like he's having open court? The emperor is in his courtyard and receiving people, and we're seeing all this action coming on. We know from this that it's unlikely that the Jews from Jerusalem had ever sent any information forward to defend their case. It's like, he's out of Jerusalem, he's out of our face, let it go. We can't be bothered going that far to chase him. Let the Romans deal with him, he's gone. Can you deal with God that way? Just let him go out of your life?
Don't work very good.
It don't work so good. And if they thought that was their escape by just letting the nuisance go away, They had another thing coming, but that's not part of our story today. So the Jews in Rome are sitting there saying, what is this all about? And when you ask Paul, what is this all about? Paul is going to tell you, back to mission again, let's go. Thank you for the opportunity. Now let me talk about the mission. And he's focused back on task. And it's interesting, again, this is really no different from every other place that he's been, where he's walked in, started in the synagogue, talking to the Jews, and he's just doing the same thing. It works. They're interested, they're asking questions, they want to know what's going on. He's happy to tell them all day, every day. Come back tomorrow, tell you some more. Hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm a prisoner. I'm stuck here. So you want to come back and talk? Come on back, bring your friends. Let's have a party. Now, I don't know what limits the Romans put on how many people he could have there. But apparently he didn't exceed that. So we see that what's going on here as we come into this is that Paul's target is seriously, Jesus sent me to Rome. Let's find out what I'm here to do. I begin like I always have. I don't worry about the change. I don't worry about the discomfort. I'm not focusing on me. I'm focusing on what I'm called to do. God sent me to Rome. Let's start. You've got to love that attitude. So he says in verse 25, this final statement, the Holy Spirit spoke the truth to your forefathers when he said through Isaiah the prophet, go to this people and say, you'll be ever hearing but never understanding. You'll be ever seeing but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears. They've closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. Therefore I want you to know that God's salvation has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will listen. Oh, Paul, all the things you could have said, and you said that.
But it's logical.
It's logical.
Because that had been his pattern throughout his ministry. It had proved largely unproductive. That most of the Jews had not accepted. Here he is at the center of the world, the known world.
Yes.
Give the Jews one last chance. And if not many respond, I think that makes it conclusive, Paul, that my mission is to the Gentiles.
Right. And I think we're seeing exactly that. I think that's why Luke's putting this in here. He's saying, you have to get it. This is the last time I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
I've told you, I've told you, I've told you. It's consistent. Every time it happens, they get the opportunity to choose to listen or not to listen, and they choose to not listen. Now, we've already seen that. We go back a couple of verses when some of them were convinced by what he said, but others didn't say could not. It said would not believe. It's a choice. It's always a choice to believe or not to believe. It's a choice. And these words from Isaiah said, these people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear. They have closed whose eyes? Their eyes. They've made a choice. And it's like, if we haven't got it by this stage of the book of Acts, we may never get it. Say it one more time. Just understand. The way of life had been given to the Jews, and they have chosen not to receive it. It had been given, unchosen. Given, rejected. Given, until at this point he says, now you've got to understand, I want you to know that God's salvation has been sent to the Gentiles, and they will listen. Every Gentile will listen? No, not saying that. But he's saying the message that you as a race should have brought to the Gentiles, to the world, because that was the whole purpose of your choosing and of your blessing from the beginning, it is going to go. It is going to go to the Gentiles, and they will listen. It's kind of like, okay, this is the focus of the mission as we start going through that. And what we see happening here is that as Paul focuses on this attitude of choice, he's also pointing out the fact that God is at work in this thing, and God knew from way back in the days of Isaiah that this will be what the challenge will continue to be. George,
well, you asked the question, what happened to the centurion, because nothing is really mentioned about that centurion.
Yeah.
And You're right. I looked at all the references. There's nothing to say. But I also found out that it's probably not just one centurion. It's probably a rotation of centurions. And in Rome, it was really the centurions that were attached to the Praetorian Guard, which is like the highest military group in Rome. Mm-hmm. So people in this highest military group became exposed to Paul because periodically each one of them was chained to him. And the end of Philippians says, the last part of Philippians says, all the saints greet you, but especially those who are of Caesar's household. And the feeling of that is household isn't household like we think, but household means the imperial civil servants in Rome.
Yeah.
So that there became believers amongst the administrators of the Roman Empire.
Yes. That's what you call a captive audience.
Yeah.
They chained to the prisoner and he just told them the whole story. And they heard everything. Like I said a few weeks ago, it's like they went to seminary. They got the whole thing, the whole enchilada. And I think it's exciting to see that. And I think that as we see that, we often underestimate the size of opportunities that God brings to us. And we think, well, it's just this, when it's really something much bigger. And again, our focus back on, well, it's just this. There's a big thing going on here. God is at work. I wanted to just point out, because I'm puzzled, why did he raise this passage from Isaiah? Why this particular passage? He could have raised all sorts of passages. Why this one? And what is this parting shot that he's bringing here as he starts to lead in this direction? And if you go back, you're going to find it from Isaiah chapter 6. And just before what he quotes, it says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me." He said, go to this people, be ever hearing but never understand. And back to what he quoted. Now, one thing about the Hebrew people is they did understand their scriptures. They memorized passages. So when you start them here, they have the context that's going to come to mind. It's a trigger we lack. We've got to go back and look it up because we're not that good. But I think he's saying something here. And I think it's important why Luke is raising this piece, because the unasked question is, who will go? And the answer in this case is, Paul went, right? The Jews should have gone, but they would not. So Paul, as part of this new sect, goes. He said, here I am, send me. Back to that picture again. How many people had the revelation of God? Did the Jewish nation have the revelation of God? Cautiously, yes. They wouldn't add that last piece, but they had it. Did they have the insight they needed? Did they have the history with God? Critical point, did they have the relationship with God? And then we start to find that although there may have been very many sincere people there, yet as a group, that relationship with God was lacking. Paul comes through, he's got relationship with God, he understands who Jesus is, he understands what this is all about. He's already indicated, hey, I'm missiocentric, I'm focusing on the call, I'm here. Who will I send and who will go for me? Duh, here I am. And what results am I going to have? Well, when I start speaking to these people, they're going to make a choice. And they're going to hear, but not hear. See, but refuse to see. They're going to catch a glimpse, but refuse to dwell on the understanding that comes from the revelation of Jesus, and they're going to reject the message. Is that Paul's problem? No. Because God is in charge of results, right? Paul's problem is, will I go for you, Lord? Will I do what you want me to do? God's problem is to work with those people, because it's the Spirit that brings them into life, not Paul. And again, we spend our lives worrying about that thing. What will happen if? But, that isn't really part of the question, really, is it? It's not what will happen if, it's who will I send and who will go for me? And the answer to that question is